In the year 1324, the emperor of the Mali Empire departed his capital city of Niani on a pilgrimage to Mecca. He traveled, as befit his station, with an entourage. The entourage consisted of approximately 60,000 people, personal attendants, soldiers, slaves, heralds, and officials of the court. Accompanying this procession were 80 to 100 camels, each carrying approximately 130 kilograms of pure gold dust. There were also, by various accounts, 500 slaves, each carrying a golden staff. The man at the center of this procession was Mansa Musa, the 10th Mansa, emperor of the Mali Empire, ruler of a territory that stretched across much of what is now West Africa, encompassing the gold fields of Bambuk and Bure that made his empire the primary source of gold in the medieval world. He was, by any serious assessment of the historical evidence, the wealthiest individual who has ever lived. Estimates of his net worth, adjusted to modern values, consistently place it above $400 billion, a number that puts him well ahead of any individual on any contemporary wealth ranking. When Mansa Musa traveled to Mecca, he didn't just travel. He rewrote the economic history of every region his procession passed through. The Mali Empire's wealth rested on a geographic accident of extraordinary consequence. Its territory sat astride the two most valuable trade goods in the medieval economy: gold and salt. The gold fields of the upper Niger River basin, the Bambuk and Bure deposits, produced quantities of gold that were, by medieval standards, almost incomprehensible. The Mali Empire controlled access to this gold and taxed its trade heavily. Every gram of gold that moved northward across the Sahara to the Mediterranean world passed through territory the emperor controlled and generated revenue for his treasury. Salt, meanwhile, was as valuable as gold to populations in the savanna and forest regions south of the Sahara, where it was scarce. The salt mines of Tagaza, deep in the Saharan interior, were also under Mali's sphere of influence. The empire sat at the intersection of gold moving north and salt moving south, a structural economic position of extraordinary leverage that generated wealth continuously from the volume of trade rather than merely from its own production. Ibn Battuta, the Moroccan explorer who visited the Mali Empire, described it as a place of remarkable order, justice, and prosperity. Its cities, Timbuktu, Djenné, Niani, were centers of learning as well as commerce, home to scholars and libraries that would later be recognized as among the most significant repositories of medieval Islamic knowledge. When Mansa Musa inherited this empire in 1312, he inherited all of this, and he ruled it for approximately 25 years with a combination of military effectiveness, administrative competence, and cultural ambition that expanded its territory and its reputation across the known world. The pilgrimage of 1324 was, among other things, a diplomatic exercise. Mansa Musa was a devout Muslim, and the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. But the manner in which he conducted it was also a deliberate display of imperial power to the rulers and populations of the territories he would cross. His route took him northward through the Mali Empire to the Sahara, across the desert to Egypt, and from there along the established Hajj routes through the Arabian Peninsula to Mecca. In each city along the way, and most significantly in Cairo, where he paused for an extended visit, Mansa Musa distributed gold. He gave gold to the poor as alms, as Islamic practice encourages. He gave gifts of gold to officials, to merchants, to scholars, to anyone of significance he encountered. He spent gold on the construction and endowment of mosques along his route. He paid his expenses in gold. He bought goods and services in gold. He also gave gold away in quantities that, in retrospect, constitute one of the most dramatic examples of an inflation event in documented economic history. The Mediterranean world of the 14th century operated on a gold standard. The value of gold, expressed in its exchange rate against goods and against silver, was determined by the relationship between the quantity of gold in circulation and the volume of economic activity it had to serve. When Mansa Musa arrived in Cairo and spent and distributed gold at the scale his procession carried, he increased the local gold supply with extraordinary abruptness. The Cairo economy, which was among the largest and most sophisticated in the medieval world, had not suddenly expanded its productive capacity. It had simply, very suddenly, found itself with dramatically more gold chasing the same quantity of goods and services. The result was inflation. Not gradual inflation, but rapid, severe devaluation of gold relative to goods. What economists would now describe as a demand-pull inflation event caused by an abrupt monetary supply shock. The price of goods in Cairo rose. The value of gold, in terms of what it could purchase, fell. Contemporary accounts, including those of the Egyptian scholar Al-Amari, who wrote about the event approximately 12 years after it occurred and interviewed people in Cairo who had lived through it, described the economic disruption in striking terms. Al-Amari wrote that the flood of gold from the Mali procession had caused such devastation of the gold price in Egypt that the effects were still being felt a decade or more after Mansa Musa had passed through. Historical economists have attempted to quantify the scale of this inflation, and estimates typically suggest that gold lost approximately 25% of its purchasing power in Egypt and the broader North African region during the decade following 1324. This is a remarkable consequence of a single person's expenditure on a journey. Mansa Musa, apparently becoming aware of the damage he had caused, attempted to correct it on his return journey. He borrowed gold back from Egyptian merchants at interest, absorbing some of the excess he had introduced into the market, in what amounted to a rudimentary monetary policy intervention. Whether this was a deliberate strategy or a pragmatic response to complaint from Egyptian officials is not clear from the historical record. The diplomatic and cultural consequences of the pilgrimage extended well beyond Egypt. When Mansa Musa reached Mecca, he encountered a scholar and architect named Abu Ishaq al-Sahili, an Andalusian poet and architect from Granada. Al-Sahili returned to Mali with the emperor, and the buildings he constructed there, mosques and palace architecture that fused North African and sub-Saharan aesthetic traditions, became the defining visual character of Malian architecture. The Great Mosque of Djinn, rebuilt in its current form in 1907, but following a tradition that traces to the structures of this period, is the largest mud brick building in the world and reflects the architectural lineage that al-Sahili initiated. The pilgrimage also put Mali on the map of European geographical and commercial knowledge in a literal sense. The Catalan Atlas of 1375, one of the most important cartographic documents of the medieval period, depicts the ruler of Mali on his throne, holding a gold nugget, with a notation identifying him as Musa Mali, Lord of the Negroes of Guinea. So abundant is the gold which is found in his country that he is the richest and most noble king in all the land. European merchants and explorers who later pushed south along the African coast in the 15th century were, in part, following the commercial intelligence that Mansa Musa's pilgrimage had circulated, seeking the source of the gold that this emperor had scattered so freely across the medieval world. Mali's dominance did not outlast the 14th century. The empire fragmented under pressure from internal succession disputes and external military pressure from the rising Songhai Empire to the east. By the 15th century, Timbuktu had passed from Mali's control, and by the 16th century the empire had effectively ceased to exist as a political entity. The gold fields that had made Mali great continued to produce. The gold simply moved through different hands. But the moment of 1324, the procession of 60,000 people and 80 camels through the Saharan routes to Mecca, the gold distributed with a largesse that disrupted the economy of the medieval world's most sophisticated city, remains one of the most vivid demonstrations in recorded history of what genuinely extraordinary wealth looks like when it moves through the world. Mansa Musa broke the gold market, not through malice or strategy, but simply by being exactly as wealthy as he was, and moving.